Wait, isn't everybody at war over atheism?
Atheism? No. We've learned to get rid of all the isms in our time. Yes, long ago we realized isms are great for those who are rational. But in the hands of irrational people, isms always lead to violence.
Welcome everybody to a new episode of Tim's 2 Cents, where Tim finds out that he's a fucking idiot every single week and tries to explain to you why he's not a fucking idiot, but then life comes back and reminds him that he is. Not entirely. We'll get into that later a little bit. This is episode 13, and I should have expected something to be going wrong around now. I'm also using 13 as an excuse to pick something that I see in history as being unlucky. I'll give them that. If nothing else, this ism is unlucky because it seems great to most people. A lot of people think it's a good idea. It's pretty pervasive in society, and it's stuck around for a long time after having multiple times where it's been shown to, if not fail, then to at least make life underneath it quite a bit worse. But this is, if you don't know, if you come into this show for the first time, this is basically my show. I do the ymb.tc podcast with Daniel Brown and Zach Vole every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can check that out. It's a live show. Get in the chat box. We probably every other week we have a guest on too, so you can send us chats to ask them questions if you'd like. Or if you just want to come on and hang out, that's more of a hangout show, and we kind of just chill, have fun. It is Bitcoin or cryptocurrency or liberty centric. Pretty much that would entail most any of the things that we talk about on that show, but sometimes we go off on other stuff like philosophy. Philosophy is more, or just thinking about ideas is more what I do on this show. I basically just rant at you guys for about a half hour. I explained the other one. If you did hear about it through that, you'll probably know me. Besides that, we also have another show on our network where it's with Zach Vole, the other third of the ymb.tc podcast, where he does an interview every single week, and that's very crypto-centric. It's always pretty much about Bitcoin or altcoins or somebody with some kind of knowledge on that, where if you're looking for more in-depth discussion on the technology behind Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, or maybe something very much tied to that, you can find stuff there. You're not going to find that here. Most of them just rambling about things because I don't like having set facts to deal with. It's much easier to just deal with ideas and people's perceptions of ideas. You also have a new show, if you guys haven't checked it out. It's called Unpopular Opinion, and that is two guys. They're not in the ymb.tc show. I don't think they've ever been guests on there either. But they just talk about shit. They talk. It's not at all about Bitcoin. It's not at all about crypto. It's not all about philosophy. It seems like it's mostly current event stuff. They kind of just it's more, again, probably like the ymb.tc thing, where it's like a hangout. It's just two guys talking to each other. So check them out. That's I'm not quite sure on the one guy's name, but I know the one is he's Ryan. Check him out. He's a good dude. And hit them up on Twitter. You can get me on Twitter at BakersDozen93, and throw me any complaints, discussions, compliments, why you thought the episode was good, why you thought it sucked, or new ideas that you guys want me to talk about. If anybody's listening, please let me know. I'm dying here. But I also want to tell you why we're able to do all these extra new shows. That's thanks to Chronologic and their very generous sponsorship. It's an Ethereum-based project where it deals with debt contracts, smart contracts, like tangible ways that we can become less dependent on a government system to live our lives. Because there is something where you need to be able to trust people, and you need to be able to engage in commerce and engage in the sharing of things. But it's nice to have a sense of security there, and something like Chronologic provides that without you having to go to the state for contracts and stuff like that. So check them out, let them know you heard about it through us, and let them know that they should keep on supporting us. But anyway, I'll get into the show just as quickly. And like I said, this is episode 13, so I should have expected something bad to happen. I've lost my wallet now for like the fifth time. So that's been cool today. trying to figure out, and I'm not even sure if it's lost yet, and that's probably the worst part, is just kind of wandering around, just looking at random stupid places where I might have put it, and then wondering if I dropped it. Nobody's gotten anything on my credit card yet. I don't see any new transactions. But again, that doesn't help, because maybe they just took the cash and threw it expecting me to just cancel the card. But you're wrong, you fucker, because I'm trying to use that as a gauge to if I did drop it in a parking lot or something like that. But anyway, unlucky episode 13, so we're going to talk about socialism. I'm not really going to make any distinction between socialism, communism, anarcho-socialism, anarcho-communism. I'm not really going to deal with all that because I just don't care. I'm just going to talk about the idea of socializing things, of spreading the kind of what's even the word I'm trying to think? Spreading the risk of something out amongst the community, because that's kind of how I see what socialism is you're trying to take away the risk from the individual. You're trying to, whether it's providing free college, free food, free healthcare, free anything, you're trying to take away the risk for the individual, and you're trying to make that individual so they have just kind of like a baseline of whatever you believe is a human right or is a specific need in that society. And you do that by everybody kind of coming together. They pool all the resources, depending on what strain you're dealing with of socialism. There either is or is not private property anymore. There either is or is not a government. I mean, there are anarcho-socialists, anarcho-communists, where everything's kind of owned by just the workers. Any kind of a business would be completely employee run. There'd be no like head to it, which I'm not quite sure how that works, because there's still a CEO of those companies. Because there are some companies in our system which they might say that's why, is because you kind of just have to in the American system. But there are those companies where they're like, we're completely owned by our employees, but I mean, I believe a CEO is an employee still, so whatever. Basically, again, if you haven't heard the show before, I try to pick apart ideas, figure out what's good in them, what's bad, what is kind of just the chaff that is just there for the real hardcore people to kind of just repeat themselves and convince themselves that they are right and that they are not, they have figured out the best possible way to live their life. And I try to pick the like nuggets of truth out of each and every idea and try to figure out what is best to apply to your life. What kind of ideas should you be taking in? Because I don't know if this is the thing. I like this. I like the idea that like what you consume does then affect what you do. Like your output is affected by your input, and your output is affected by your ideas and your thoughts, and those become actions, and those become how you live your life, and that becomes the way your life goes. So I think talking about ideas, talking about our belief systems between different people is more important than I think we make them out to be sometimes. Sometimes people kind of just pick certain ideas that they're going to follow, that they believe in, and then they don't really affect their life that much. They don't really change their life. They kind of just believe it. At least they say they do. And I think if you're going to commit yourself to an idea, depending on what it is, it does matter what it is. Like stoicism versus that's not really a good idea, but like an ism where it's like, no, I mean, most isms are kind of hardcore, but I can see the difference between something like committing yourself to what is supposed to be like a life-altering, like a religious belief system versus kind of like a softer political system of like maybe just conservatism, where you're not abstaining from things necessarily. You're not telling yourself that you can't do certain things, but it is like kind of a code of conduct, a code of operating something. Anyway, we'll get into it. Normally what I like to do is I try to take the good parts of it and then we do the bad, because I don't know, maybe give me the good news first. Maybe that's why I do it. I don't really know. It doesn't really matter. But socialism, I mean, like I've said before in this podcast, a lot of my upbringing was conservative, right-leaning Christian, not exactly libertarian, but kind of leaning that way, at least open to those ideas, but very much not liberal. My mom kind of grew up Democrat, but it was back in the 60s, so it's very different than what it is now. Most of my upbringing was, a lot of people are talking about capitalism and free markets and free trade, even though we don't really have those things in America, at least how I would define what an actual free market is. But all that to say, socialism, at least in most of the circles I've been in my life, has just been kind of demonized. Socialists or communists, it's not like a hatred necessarily, but they definitely get made fun of. It's looked at as just a bad idea regardless, even though those same people who shit on somebody for wanting free healthcare or free, like a guaranteed basic income, are fine with the socialization of the military, the police, any form of government. I see kind of, it is an act of socialism. It's an act of the kind of people deciding that they want something as like a safety net for the individual. What they see is something that's going to protect the individual. And that is the big crux of the issue, is, to me at least, it's a great idea in theory. It's a good idea if you have people who are going to all work together. And that is, like, if there is a good in socialism, I can see it promoting a kind of unity in a society, especially if you don't have other things, if you don't have like a tradition, if you don't have religion, if you don't have a super, or if you don't want to promote those kind of things or promote a very strong brand of nationalism. A socialism, I would believe, does have a way of kind of bringing people together. If you're all under the same commune or government and you kind of all get money from that central thing, you do share something in common with the other people that are doing that. I don't mind the idea of, if we are going to talk about how every life is precious, everybody has the ability to do whatever they want, then something like guaranteed basic income does kind of make sense. You just kind of give enough for people to be able to live, enough for people to be able to eat, enough for people to be able to survive, get healthcare, get treatment for things. And then the idea would be then those people are either able to focus on getting better skills to get a better paying job, or to pursue artistic things, to raise their children, to do all these kinds of things where it is a hassle, or it is a problem that you have to get just a manual labor or just a minimum wage job just to support yourself. Instead, why don't we give people enough money to live? If we're able to spend all this money on blowing other countries up and kind of just giving tax cuts to millionaires. So I understand that argument. I understand the idea that, hey, we could probably feed everybody in this country if we just if we cut parts of the budget and put it towards a basic universal income, then that would save a lot of people, or at least it would feed more people. So I see that as it is like a good idea. It's kind of like the ultimate form of charity, kind of, and I'll talk about that later. Like, the idea of it is very charitable. The idea of it is very, it should be self-sacrificing. Like, everybody would come together to help support those people, to each, I don't even know the exact phrase, but to each however much they need, or to each however much they require to live, something like that. And then everybody kind of just contributes as much as they can, and the whole group then benefits from having everybody kind of pooling their resources together and helping lift each other up, instead of depending on the individual or depending on just themselves or their family to get through life. I mean, I'm not against the idea of just like if most of history is just kind of the governments or very rich people getting richer, having a better society, having more things off of the backs of basically just the average worker, I do have something of a sympathy for that idea. The sympathy for the fact that, at least in my mind, the fact that there is something of an exploitation in our society. There's something of and it does seem kind of wrong in a way to tell people that, hey, you have to keep working here, you have to work for 40 years, and then, oh, well, your boss will get a little bit richer, you might make a little bit more money. I think there is, I don't really buy the whole thing about free markets, that the best, like each person is making the best, is getting the better in a trade. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but I forget who it is, but there's been plenty of libertarian guys that have made the argument that in any kind of a free exchange, both people are getting the best deal because they are both deciding, like you say, you go to the store, you pay $5 for a bag of broccoli or something like that, and you go and you say to yourself, well, I would rather have the broccoli than have this $5, and then the store says I would rather have the $5 than the broccoli, and yeah, maybe in a free market, and maybe it doesn't even matter because it is subjective. Like, value is subjective and everything like that. So, but I do think that in most exchanges, like objectively, even though I do have to admit that value is kind of subjective, objectively, Walmart is getting the better deal whenever you go into their store and buy a $10 shirt. Like, I get it's cheaper than someplace else, but they're just making bank on that at this point. Walmart is not, you're not getting the better deal from doing that because, well, I don't even know if I can argue that, but it feels wrong. It feels like, especially in our society now, where how everything is a corporation, everything is just this giant monolith of just selling shit to people, where you could just, maybe a shirt's a good idea because you don't need that many shirts. You don't need all this stuff, but we've kind of just been, I don't know if you want to say conditioned or just led to believe that we do need to just kind of constantly be buying things. We need to spend more money. We need to buy new shoes. We need to buy new books. Nobody buys books. We need to buy more electronics. We need to do all this shit where probably that company, whoever's selling the new computer, the new cell phone, is getting a better deal off of the child labor they use to harvest the materials they need for that than you are at being able to just buy it for a cheaper price. As far as the value they receive from it, the value you receive from your smartphone, I could at least see the argument and be sympathetic to the argument that they are kind of screwing people. And I think that's, pretty much all I can say for the good parts of socialism. And it does come down to, it just feels good. And that is a very, very, very attractive to everybody. You want to feel good. You want to do something that feels good. You want to believe in something that goes, hey, we can all kind of get together and help people, and we would all want to achieve things. We want to lift the poor up. We don't want to leave them to be just kind of left behind as society grows bigger and better. We don't want them we don't want to think about somebody starving in America while we have a cell phone, a tablet, a laptop, a TV, an Xbox. It just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. Walmart, the idea of it doesn't feel good. Apple using child labor doesn't feel good. All this stuff doesn't feel good. And that is all I can really say about. That'll kind of make my point in the next section of this, is that socialism feels good. It feels very nice to have the idea of kind of just, well, everybody will just be provided for and we'll all contribute as much as we can and it'll all work out like that. But first you'll hear an ad, you'll hear Daniel's beautiful voice, and then I'll be back.
Hey guys, today's show is brought to you by Chronologic.network. Chronologic is an Ethereum-based project that aims to solve time-related problems on the blockchain. Through Chronologic's 3 core products, the Ethereum alarm clock, debt smart contracts, and the day token minting mechanism, they solve the problems of payment scheduling, crypto loan time constraints, and unstable token launches. Find out more at Chronologic.network.
All right. Hey guys, hope you like that. Hope you like, it's just another little shout out for our guys at Chronologic who've been doing us a favor, sponsoring us and letting us bring you guys more content. But now I get to shit on socialism, which is something I've been prepared for pretty much my entire life. And I mean, the first thing I can say is it just doesn't really seem to work. Like every single time it's introduced, all it really does is kind of just bloat things. It seems like, I mean, you'll see most times people bring up healthcare for the poor because we do have a certain amount of socialization in our societies now, where most people do have access, or at least in name, like in idea, they have access to the police, they have access to things like that. We're not as segregated, at least in America, as things used to be. But there's still areas that don't receive that attention. There's still areas where a socialized good or socialized service just doesn't reach certain areas, whether that's because of ethnic differences or because of financial disparity or something like that, where, yeah, the idea is there, but it doesn't really work in practice. And I think that's true for most any kind of socialism, where, like, take the police for example, where you go, well, no, they're going to protect us. They're going to be there to make sure that we don't have to protect ourselves. They're going to they're expected to respond just as quickly to everybody's call, no matter where they're calling from, no matter what the income in the area is. But it just doesn't work like that. They're going to favor richer areas. If they're going to favor white areas, they're going to favor the places where they're like, just whether it's a bias on the individual officer or just the whole department, they're going to go with that. People just do that. And we've kind of shown over the past 100 years, you can't really get rid of that shit. Another, like, as far as it doesn't work out the way people hope it to, as far as healthcare goes. Like, people always want to bring up Canada or Norway or a lot of the Scandinavian countries, where, I mean, Scandinavian countries have the free college and free everything like that shit too. But Canada's a good example with the healthcare. People throw that around. Where, yeah, you have things do seem to work out with socialism for the first couple years. Because you still have the work ethic in there that was developed before it became socialized. You still have the guys who are used to that old system before it was socialized and are used to working like that. And most people in that situation will continue to do so. They're not just going to quit doing that and drop their standard of care just because it's now been socialized. So you'll get those guys who do that for another 10, 15 years. Depending. But like anybody who's from the old guard, who's from the old system, are going to at least 5 years. I'll give it to them there. At least 5 years are going to continue with the better care, going to continue with harder work and pushing themselves past what they necessarily have to do because that's just what they're used to. That's just how they've lived their life. That's how they've been trained. But as soon as you start getting the people who are coming up in that system or coming up in a socialized system, you see drop in care. You see drop in just the ability for hospitals to take people. You see pictures of hospitals down in Venezuela where it's just kind of, the people are just sitting on cots outside of, in just hallways, just with just bleeding. Now again, you could say that's propaganda, but I think all of this and all the problems with socialism, like I was saying before, deal with that it feels good, but there's no incentive to actually do something. You can feel good all you want, but feeling good isn't going to make you work hard whenever you're tired or whenever you don't feel like working or whenever you want to slack off. The only incentive that works for people if they don't want to do something is you reward them for working harder. You can't just wipe out that whole incentive. And wanting to feel good and having an ideal is not the same thing as an incentive. And I think a lot of people mess that up too, where, oh, but I believe in this, or, oh, but I feel very strongly about this. And it's always about what they feel, which is a very bad metric for how people act. And I think I've definitely brought that up on this show before. And I remember, because it was when I was talking about Stoicism and their whole idea that you don't look at what people are saying. You can listen, it doesn't really matter. But you look at, if you want to figure out what somebody believes, you want to figure out how somebody lives, look at how they live. Look at their actions, because that will be what they actually do is much more important than what they say. And most of the people, now, obviously there's going to be differences. There's going to be people who don't fall into this, but I would venture to say most of the people who are for socialism, or for universal basic income, or for free healthcare, or for free college, have never volunteered at a soup kitchen, have never volunteered even to help their neighbors. Because that is it. Socialism promises that kind of feel good of actually going out and volunteering and helping somebody without you having to do that. You just go, oh, well, we'll make the state do that. We'll make the commune do that. Where you have no right to feel good for that unless you are somebody who is contributing most of the money to that. I could even, maybe if these people were saying, oh, hey, well, I'll contribute 90% of the funds to doing this. But nobody does that. It's always, well, that just feels right. That just feels like it's something we should do. And it feels like people should be able to go to college, and it feels like people shouldn't have to die outside of a hospital because they can't pay for it. And that's where all their arguments come from. They're like, well, do you think that you just want babies to die in the middle of the street? Do you just want people to not go to college and just have to just work in factories? Which, my answer to that is normally yes, because that's what most people probably should be doing, or some kind of a job like this. The fact that we've made college the normal, like we've just normalized that everybody just goes to it, is obviously not helped this country. It's not built us up. We've seen a very drastic drop in our education, in our scores against other countries, and it just hasn't really worked out like that. But most people will just use emotional arguments for why socialism should be introduced, and why, how dare you not believe in it, because this is about my feelings and they matter because I think them, or something like that. It doesn't really make sense there, because there is no logic to it. And that's what I was talking about with the incentive. Like, if you want people to act in a certain way, if you want people to think a certain way, if you want people to live their life in a way that you see as beneficial or something like that, you need to give them an incentive. And an incentive is not will you feel good. You can't do that with, you can, but it's harder. Even with like training dogs, most dogs do not do things just because you pet them. It's not really very much of a reward for most dogs to just be given attention. It works with some of them, but I mean, people are normally more complicated than dogs. Not necessarily always. Most dogs, if you're going to train them, normally people do one of two things, where it's either you give them it's a food reward or a play time, like a play reward, where that you give them something that they like. You don't tell the dog that he has done a very good service for his country and then he should feel good, or you don't tell the dog that he's such a good boy. Like, you can call your dog a good boy, but just calling your dog a good boy every time he doesn't piss in the house isn't the way to train a dog. It's not the way to train a person either. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about or what I'm talking about with any of these isms, with any of these ideologies, is you're trying to train people to act in a certain way. And the fact is, you need to have an incentive for that. And socialism doesn't really provide that. Socialism just gives a base safety net for people and then says, you can try to climb up higher. This will always be here to catch you if you do fall. But there's no incentive for them to then crawl higher. There's no incentive to ever get off that safety net, to ever, or maybe you go a couple feet above it, because it doesn't really matter. If I keep on going, the same thing is going to happen if I fall. It's never necessarily going to get any better. And that's the biggest problem probably with socialism, is that there is no incentive to achieve something. There's no incentive to make new things. There's no incentive to benefit yourself, because it doesn't then go to you. You don't get the reward for your own work. My only other, and this will be my last point, is my other problem with that, the whole idea of socialism, is it's kind of insatiable, where there's no stop to it. I mean, something about it, like, it's the same as, well, it's not really the same, but there's no end to it. There's no end to socialism. There's no end to, because it is so much based on just whatever the person feels. It's based on making them feel good. So it's, well, okay, you have socialized police. Well, now you have socialized healthcare. Well, now you have socialized college. Well, now you have socialized food. Well, now you have socialized water. Now you have social, and it just goes on and on and on. And it's, I understand if you are somebody who believes in it to the point where you just go, yeah, no, just socialize everything. That's fine. Like, that at least shows some kind of connection to, like, a libertarian anarcho-capitalist, where they just go, no, just privatize everything. It's kind of the opposite of that spectrum, but at least you're being consistent. You're taking your argument to the logical conclusion, where it is just, well, why don't we just have the government and just the people pay for everything? The problem is, most people won't say that. Most people just have kind of their pet issue that they either heard on the news, on Reddit, or had a college professor explain to them why it was the biggest issue facing us today. And they just say, well, we need free healthcare, or we need free college. But then if you mention something else, well, why don't we socialize everybody having a partner in marriage? Why don't we force there to be I'm sorry, Amy, but you have to marry this guy because he needs a partner, and whenever guys don't have partners, they just start shooting people or something. Like, you can make that argument. You can make the argument that we need to socialize people in the sexual marketplace or something like that. You need to socialize everything. And most people won't go along with it. They'll have, like I said, their few pet issues that they say, well, the government needs to come in and do this because there's too much of a risk. So that's my other problem. It is kind of insatiable, where it just isn't going to stop. It's never going to be satisfied. If you start down the road of socializing things, there's always something else you can socialize. But I think I just said something that kind of reminded me of my first point, where just like if you're going to socialize everything, I don't even know what the point was, but it doesn't. I'd just be repeating myself anyway. So it was this. If you're making the argument that we should just socialize everything, if you're going to take that to natural conclusion of we just need to put a safety net under everything, like what I was saying at the beginning of the episode, you're mitigating risk for everyone. And I think that risk is the only thing that has really pushed us forward. Risk is the only thing that, like, risking something is the only way that we advance as a society, as people, or as individuals. Taking a risk, taking something that isn't a sure thing, is how every single advancement, and a lot of failures too, has happened. But you need that risk, and you need that kind of chance of failure, and what is most, like, you're statistically most likely to fail. You do need that, and you need to give people that ability to just fall through the cracks, because that will push people much further than just the idea of, well, I feel good because now people have free healthcare. The risk of dying on the street has made so much money for everybody, has pushed so many things in our society. I don't think we have enough respect for what risk is, and how much of an effect it has on making society bigger, better, even inside of a mostly socialized society like what we do live in the U.S. It's not like some other countries, but there is still, we're allowed a risk, and we're allowed to possibly fail, and to possibly just drop all the way, just rock bottom. And I think we need to keep that stuff around. We can't get rid of risk, or else we'll kind of just lose whatever has made us human. So I gotta leave that there. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Tweet me at BakersDozen93. Remember to listen to the Coin Pod. It comes out every Tuesday. I'm not sure when Unpopular Opinions comes out. And then also our ymb.tc, our main kind of flagship show, every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Live show. Get us there. Hang out with us. Chat. And we'll love you forever. Bye. Thanks.